Hey, I'm going to talk to you about a certain Jess Franco film. It's a 1971 production, and I think it's probably the film in the Jess Franco filmography I most eagerly want to take the leap to Blu-ray, to HD. I'm talking about Eugénie de Sade. To this day, the best available edition of Eugénie de Sade is the Blue Underground DVD, which is pretty old by now. It came on the market in early 2008, and it's an excellent DVD, but we really need an upgrade on this film. So I'm sure there are fellow film enthusiasts out there and Jess Franco scholars who why don't we see if somebody can prompt maybe Blue Underground or some other outfit to get talking to Eurocine. Maybe they can provide a fresh HD scan of the negative or give access to the elements, because this is a key film in Jess Franco filmography. So let's get talking about Eugénie de Sade. Eugénie de Sade I watch at least once a year. I mean, to me this film is, if Jess Franco had only made this one feature film and not dozens of films, I still think he would have, just on the strength of Eugénie de Sade alone, Jess Franco would have merited a high place up in the pantheon of European genre film craftsmen and auteurs. The film benefits from a really strong atmosphere. It's an unusual film in that it snows in Eugénie de Sade. Jess Franco, I think when you think about his work, it conjures up images maybe of sort of the jungle or some sunny beach side, and people rolling around on by the poolside or on beds in some exotic locations. A lot of his films are the stories take place somewhere like Kilimanjaro or Brazil or Istanbul. But Eugénie de Sade has this unusual location. It's quite a snowy, dreary, chilly looking, damp looking time of year in West Berlin, with excursions to, I think, Paris. And that makes the film stand out with its a wintry vibe and atmosphere. And obviously there is a really important presence of Soledad Miranda, which was probably her most accomplished role for Jess Franco. And generally the three leads, Soledad Miranda, Paul Müller, and then Jess Franco in a prominent role as this curious, nosy intellectual named Attila Tanner. The three of them together really make this movie into something special. As typical for Jess Franco, Eugénie de Sade is actually fairly thin plotted. It's a film that moves forward at a sort of a languid pace, and it totally works. I think it's the sweet spot for those who are already into Jess Franco. Landing there, it's a pleasure. Eugénie de Sade for me also is a movie that works better on repeat viewings. I can still sort of remember the first time I saw it many years ago and how it seemed really small scale and restricted in its scope, and yet I just knew this was a special film. First time I heard of this film was when I saw the trailer. I saw it on some German DVDs. There was just a trailer, and I had a very vague idea who Jess Franco was and what it was about. But there was imagery in the trailer which looked like, at the same time, it looked contemporary and retro. And this, to me, is what captures my imagination a lot, is when the film seems to take place on more than one temporal plane, and Eugénie is constructed as this one extended flashback. We start with her on a deathbed. We are in this cramped hospital room, which is represented by a hotel room which is quite typical for Jess Franco. We see a lot of hotel interiors and exteriors in his films, especially post 1970. So Eugenie is about to die, and she is visited by Attila Tenner, who starts to ask questions about her father, who's this author. And Eugenie makes a deal with him. She wants Attila to murder her, to finish her off. In exchange for that, she will tell her tale and how she ended up mangled and dying in this hospital. So this is the setup, and after that the film revolves as this big flashback with a lot of narrative, which makes this film very French. I'm not usually a huge fan of a film where a lot of the character interior state is channeled through monologues, and that's quite a French thing. I can think of movies like A Man Escaped from Robert Bresson, or Jean-Luc Godard's film Le Petit Soldat, which is his second feature film, a black and white film. And Eugenie Dessart fits into this category really well, in that we are treated to quite a few voiceovers courtesy of Eugenie as she walks around or lunges around on her bed, but it works. And the quality of writing in this film, even though the story is thin, is impressive. For a Jess Franco film, there is a definite, almost a touch of earnesty to the proceedings, even though it's in a way also a comic bookish enterprise with the characters dressed in outlandish fashions. I think one of the most celebrated images from Eugenie is when the stepfather, Paul Muller, and Eugenie are dressed in red, and the father wears these pink goggles, and Eugenie wears this kind of very period-looking sunglasses, which almost look like strange 3D glasses or something. And they go out and claim their first victim together. The story is inspired by the Marquis de Sade novella, so it's not like a thick book. It's last time I checked was maybe 120 pages. I don't remember. Eugenie de Franval, and that was the material Franco processed and filtered through his vision. It's obviously also filtered through his limited budget. It's not quite clear how this film originated. Looks like just put up a bit of his own cash to start rolling the cameras after quitting his German producer, and then showed this footage to the French, to the Paris production company, who then put up the funds to complete the film. This is the current theory. It's a really it's a film which is like a puzzle, in the sense that there are pieces that more or less contribute to the story, and then there are those interludes. So there is that sort of two-tact structure where we get to know the characters a little bit. It's quite a character-based film by Jess Franco standards. We do get to know the central characters, obviously thanks not only to the monologues I mentioned, but also just there are very good conflict scenes which are portrayed with earnesty by the characters and captured beautifully. And then there are the atmosphere interludes, which include Eugenie walking around, and there is an occasional slow dance scene, which is a very recurrent way for Jess Franco to reach feature length with his 7-page treatments and 10-page screenplays. I really appreciate Eugenie Dessart in that it shows you how you can scale down so much and yet still deliver a film which has a strong personality and ages very well. The fashions, I'm sure they looked bizarre back in 71, 69 when they shot the film. and it's obviously a product of its time with a lot of zooms and people smoking indoors all the time. But the essence of the story, the conflicts, is still valid today. The film doesn't feel antiquated from that point of view, and I think it's quite inspirational. And I would like to also repeat just how much I appreciate the visual side of things. The camera work is credited to Manuel Merino, who was a Jess Franco regular, but I tend to think that Jess Franco maneuvered the camera a lot himself, and in this film he particularly seems to be fascinated by the falling snow. And there is this icy landscape and what looks like a lake, and there is this villa by the lake where we spend a lot of time, where the corruption of Eugenie takes place. And it's also a film about books. Jess Franco was very well read, and in this film books take on a very prominent role. Eugenie's first conscious act in this film is reading, choosing a very specific topic to read on, the topic of violence and passion, namely a Marquis de Sade book. And then her second action would be hiding this fact from her father and getting discovered. The same afternoon gets the two of them, actually binds them together more and sends them off on this journey where they become these anti-heroes. It's a film with no there is no straightforward distinction between who's good and who's the baddie, so there is that interesting gray zone, and especially Jess Franco's character embodies that double nature. You could say he's clearly an intellectual, but he's strongly drawn to crime, even though he himself isn't ready to go all the way. So he's there observing, commenting, and warning our anti-heroes. But at the same time, there is a strong fascination. He cannot deny that he wants actually to be them, but he doesn't have the courage. He doesn't have what it takes. So it's a film about breaking the taboos, and there is a number of things in this film which can be quite maybe even unsettling for some, even though on the execution level it's a fairly light-hearted film, so it's not gory and it's not particularly I mean, there are acts of aggression, but they are so stylized. So I think the prevalent quality of the film is the comic book stylization of the nightclub acts and the outfits. The beauty of on-location photography, which is amazing. Some of it is wobbly and blurry, but it has that element of truth to it, which just, to me, it's 100% convincing. Another aspect to this film, besides this stylization, is the character interplay. It's really interesting how some of the most the strongest scenes are actually this stepfather and Eugenie making their pact together, and then scheming and coming up with a plan how to commit a devious crime which would go unpunished. Then they go carry it out, and all of this makes them because they set themselves a goal and they go about achieving it. Makes them very interesting and accessible characters, which I wish more Jess Franco films had this quality, because a lot of the time Jess Franco's stories tend to go even more towards abstraction, where we don't get this insight into the characters' specific thoughts, so we remain sort of outside the action, whereas in Eugenie we're allowed a closer approach. And then there is that, again, going back to the Attila Tanner character, there is that extra level of the filmmaker embodying a character who's a prominent character within the film's narrative. And then there are the home movies filmed allegedly by by our anti-heroes. We don't actually see them with the film camera. There are no scenes showing them filming them, but we do get to see the footage discovered after the fact. And those are basically little snuff films they've shot for fun, where they seem to pick up strangers or hitchhikers, bring them home, and then sort of play around with them before dispatching them, and again, sadistic ways. The supporting cast, outside of the three actors I already mentioned, is less impressive. There is one or two familiar faces from the Jess Franco universe, but their characters are way more flat, and there is no great depth to their performances. But generally it's a cozy Jess Franco ensemble, and for a small scale movie there is enough variety, and we also get those brief moments where we sort of step out, like I said, of the main narrative, and then we're in some smoke-filled room where there is this guy cracking jokes, terrible jokes, or there is this hippie girl dancing in backlight with those kind of orange, glowing orange lights backlighting her. So it's a real treat if you're into this kind of decadent, urban 1970s European style of filmmaking. And I honestly it's hard for me to think whether Jess Franco ever remade Eugenie de Sade. He's made another film with the same title, but the plot there is quite different. So to me that would also be an indication that he was reasonably satisfied with the way this movie panned out, because a lot of his films, even his films considered classic, he'd remade numerous times, recycling the plots, even decades later sometimes. Whereas in this case, I think this is more or less the film where Jess Franco felt that as an auteur he's hit the mark, it's set for himself, which is amazing. And there is also a funny little continuity, you could say mistake in this film, or something I just noticed, is that the same prop we see in the house where the two protagonists live. They have this framed sketch or a little picture above in the bedroom above the double bed. And then as they actually take a plane to Paris and they go into the changing room, apparently this very same exact framed picture is now seen hanging on the door, on the bathroom door. So clearly that was not intentional. And then they shot both sequences in the same house, but in the story it's hundreds of miles apart. So that's something I noticed after several viewings. That's something just leapt at me. Generally, continuity in Jess Franco films can be pretty loose, and he's not someone who would really be a stickler to perfect, lined up shots or anything. Speaking of shots, there is quite a lot of reframing within the takes, which is both unusual and stimulating, in that you start with a certain camera position as somebody's talking, and then the camera just sort of pans away from them or slightly zooms in, zooms out. So in more traditional filmmaking, those kind of refocusings, repositionings would be cut out. They would be hidden from the viewer, whereas Jess Franco lets them in, so that he doesn't have a problem with us knowing that there is a camera there filming, and actively probing and exploring sort of the scene, the space. And there is no way you can talk about this film, Eugenie de Sade, without bringing up the music, which is, I don't think there is any original material composed for this film. It's credited to Bruno Nicolai, which is one of my very favorite musicians, who also used to arrange scores for Ennio Morricone. And just the combination of those wintry landscapes with that music, with the vocals, it's this film's trademark, and it lends just so much extra emotion to the passages which otherwise could have been too slow or would have lacked that magic quality. So it's really a huge contribution to the film, and you can find some of the music from Eugenie Dessart on YouTube, and you see that these are library tracks by Bruno Nicolai. There is a beautiful scene which I really enjoy. There is a kind of a literary little party. It's a reception, and Attila Tanner is present, and he interrogates the two characters in terms of he hints that he's in the know about their activities, but he doesn't betray them to the police. So he just says that he's out there sort of following them and watching them. If this is the first time you're watching, welcome to my channel. I'm Alex. On here I talk about movies underappreciated by the public at large, world cinema, European cinema, cult movies. I'm also a passionate collector of films on physical media. I own a fair few DVDs and Blu-rays. So if you're into movie talk, make sure you check out my playlist and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss next time I drop a video. Thank you.